What is the one secret ingredient to a winning employer brand recipe? Get the answer from James Ellis, Chief Brand Builder at Employer Brand Labs.
Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're chatting with the man that Google officially labels as the employer brand nerd. If you don't believe me, just Google who is the employer brand nerd, and you'll see for yourself. Let's welcome the man, James Ellis.
Yeah, it's weird when you type in who is the employer brand nerd, and sometimes my picture shows up, and I just want to say, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry that is what got, thrown at you. It's like, it's safe for work technically, but no one wants to see that. Thanks for having me on. This is going to be a blast.
Love it. So we put together a list of tough questions for James because, this is something that you can talk about in your sleep. So we're excited to hear your perspective. But first, let's hear a little bit about James's background.
So James Ellis is an authority on employer branding, focusing on companies who think they have no choice but to post and pray for talent. He is the principal of Employer Brand Labs, a best-selling author, keynote speaker, practitioner, and podcaster with a wealth of experience across multiple industries for almost a decade. And I have to tell our listeners, because this was funny to me, but I added James on LinkedIn, and before I even had a chance to message him, he already responded to me and said, well, I guess didn't respond, but messaged me and said, yes, I will be on your podcast. Let's cut to the chase. And it was perfect. So we are so excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us, James.
There's something about podcasters. We all know each other. We're all like, oh yeah, everything is about, can I get you as a guest? Like, let's just go and say, yes, I will happily be on your podcast. Yes.
We're starting to get that, we've surpassed 30 episodes, not anywhere close to your 200 plus, but I mean, that's impressive. So
yeah, well, it's just me in my dining room. Anybody can do it.
I do have a question though, just to kind of kick things off before we get into the ones that we'd prepared. On our first call, we were chatting and I noticed your whiteboard, you have that statement behind you, strategy replaces effort. Tell us a little bit more about what that's all. Yeah, tell us the story there.
So it's a collection of just thoughts that I think kind of connect in terms of things like, hey, brand is about creating choice and strategy, replaces effort. That line in particular, strategy replaces effort, is from Alex M.H. Smith, who wrote an amazing book called No BS Strategy. Highly, 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 highly recommend it. It's like 140 pages. It's like a short flight kind of book. But in it, he explains everything you'd learn in an MBA strategy program in ways that you're like, oh, I get it. This is what this is about. That strategy is not some highfalutin, big picture, got to have the MBA sort of thing, but really it's about saying you have resources, you have these opportunities, you can either outwork other people or you can outthink other people. And strategy is that outthinking other people. And so in a way, it just replaces all the effort you could have done trying to outwork somebody. So I just thought that was such a great idea, especially since recruiting seems to be very much an outwork, out effort kind of job for most people. I don't know any recruiters who aren't completely burned out. I think a little strategy might be helpful.
Yeah, that sounds like the same kind of, Matt always tells me, think smarter, not harder. And, sometimes I'll be trying to open a package with my hands and he's like, just get scissors, So just having a plan in place.
Cutting edge technology right there.
Truly.
Just having a plan in place can save you tons of time and effort.
Just thinking it through. Yeah. Recruiting is so much about doing what everybody else does. Unfortunately, like every recruiter was, they all say I have the same story. I went backwards into it. I fell into it. I don't know how. I never went to school for this, as if any of us went to school for any of the things we do. And they got taught sitting side by side with another recruiter who learned it by, wait for it, sitting side by side with another recruiter in 1983 who learned it sitting side by side with another recruiter in 1971, right? It's just, there's so much of this kind of like passed on received wisdom. And it's like, oh, this is what recruiting is. And if you take a moment and go, what are we trying to achieve? What's another way of doing it? There's so many opportunities. And that's why I love employer brand. It's kind of that area where you put a little thought into who you want to target, what you're trying to achieve, not how to get as many applications as you can, but how to get the right hire. It changes all the math. It hopefully leads to a little less burnout.
That makes total sense. And, there can be innovation in everything in life, including areas of business like recruiting that typically have this kind of standard protocol of doing things. So talk to us more about employer branding by telling us what it is not. So let's do this backwards.
Love it. I love it. And that's honestly, you could tattoo that on me somewhere. We just do this backwards. Everybody seems to think, and everybody acts like employer brand is how to make your company look good. And I'm not sure if you're watching this when you're listening, but I'm using big old bunny ear air quotes when I say look good. There's nothing about that that's useful. Every single company, and I mean every single company, will say and honestly think that they're a good company. The company that you're like, not in a million years would I ever work for that company, they think they're a great company. The company that, let's be fair, the companies that were invested in scandals years and years and years ago, they think they're a great company. They all say they're a great company. So what's the value in saying you're a great company? And the answer is nothing. Employer brand has nothing to do with saying you're great. What employer brand is supposed to do is say, this is how you're different, so that people can go, oh, I understand the way in which you're great. I think that's great too. Let's match up. Recruiting is not about how do I get 1 million people to buy my hot dogs or toothpaste or whatever it is. That's consumer marketing. Employer branding recruiting is about how to find the right lid for the pot. You're trying to create matches. That means you've got one job, you can only put one person in it. Not, what do you need 1 million applicants? What do you need 1 million people saying, oh, I heard this is a great company, right? We all heard, if you ever talk to recruiters whose companies have gone viral, I imagine OpenAI is going through this right now, where they had some sort of amazing thing happen. Everybody goes, ooh, I heard it's a really good company to work for, send application. And they just get deluged with applications. Did that make their recruiter's job easier? No, it's not about applications. It's about saying, look, there is a role. There's a certain kind of person who's going to be an amazing fit for this, who's going to drive a lot of value, who's going to get a lot of satisfaction out of working here. Who is that person? It's not about making lots of haystacks. It's about finding the needles. Because, saying that I need more needles, so I'm going to make bigger haystacks, which seems to be the recruiter's motto, that's not how needles happen. It's about saying, this is what we're about. And the more you lean into what makes you different, the more you can prove it, the more you can show it, the stronger your brand gets. My favorite example is Goldman Sachs, who I hate as a company. And I would never, ever want to work there because we've all seen the articles, you work 100-hour work week, 100-hour work weeks, you never go home, you never see your families, you live there, and it sounds horrible. Except they have no problems filling roles because what they offer people is really simple. Give us your 20s and your 30s and we'll give you a big pile of cash at the end of it. Sound good? Cool, deal, excellent. See you on Monday. That is a strong employer brand. There's no miscommunication. There's no lack of expectations. You get what you're getting into. And most companies are all about looking good and then are surprised when after putting the rosy glasses on everybody and having people show up and actually starting the job go, oh, this isn't what I was promised. I leave. They're shocked. That's not employer branding. Think about what makes you different. Focus on that. Prove it. Make it credible. That's a strong employer brand.
That makes total sense. So we talk to a lot of companies that have really poor reputations online when we talk about like Glassdoor, Indeed, Comparably, Inhersite, all these different platforms that are where employees can rate and review. And typically, if you're not proactively asking for feedback, you get an overrepresentation of that negative sentiment.
Certainly.
So from your perspective, and tell me if I'm hearing this right or wrong, you're saying that even a company with a really horrible star rating can still be good, but maybe for certain elements of the experience, certain people will still thrive in that 2.9 star company. Yeah. Let's just stop there and see.
Yeah. Well, first off, let's focus on Glassdoor because it's easy because they're all kind of the same. And I think I know for a fact, Glassdoor has spent a lot of time, energy, and, to be perfectly blunt, money over the last 10 years, convincing you that that tiny little 2-digit number in the corner with a period in the middle is the sum total of what everybody thinks about you. And they've made a lot of money doing it. They've made way too much money doing it, because that's not actually what that number says. That number is not a description of your culture. It's not a description of your company. It's not a rating of your company. That number is the rating of your ability to set expectations. If you are told by the recruiter, this job is really hard, you're going to work hard, your boss is going to be tough on you, but at the end of the day, you get X, Y, and Z. And you show up and the job is really hard and your boss is really tough on you, but at the end of the day, you get X, Y, and Z, expectations met, 4 stars. If you are told this is an amazing place, it's a wonderful place, it's puppy dogs and daisies and tickle fights and whatever you got every Thursday, it's fantastic, it's the world's greatest employer, and you show up and there's no tickle fights, 2 stars. You're actually measuring how well you set expectations on what this company really is. So saying you have a 2.9 star is not saying you have a 2.9 company. It says you have set the wrong expectations. You haven't been honest with yourself about what you offer people, what you offer your employees. Do you offer them an amazing mission? Do you offer them amazing experience? Do you offer them a particular kind of reward? And if you don't know what you're offering that's different, all you've got left is saying is we're a great company. And then people say, okay, well, they say they're a great company. They show up and it's not what they thought a great company was. Guess what? 2 stars. That's how the rating systems work. So if you want to elevate your score, it's not about making a better company. Your company's fine. You just need to be crystal clear on who you are, who you're for, why they should want that, and communicate at every stage of the recruiting process. You do that, you'll be looking at, just under 4 stars anytime now. It doesn't take very long, but it's not about good or bad. It's about, are you properly setting expectations?
And there's probably some companies out there that lie to themselves. They don't even know who they are. And then they obviously can't be transparent because they can't be transparent with themselves.
And that's really what one of the biggest challenges with employer brand is that when you deal with a large agency, because the price of dealing with a large employer brand agency is so high, the only person in the company who can okay that particular bill is the CEO. And the CEO doesn't know what employer brand is. So they think, oh, it must be making my company look good, which in their mind is code for makes me look good. And so consequently, they love brands where we say, we're great, we're wonderful, we have the best culture. That doesn't tell a candidate anything of use, right? Let's be fair. That CEO is not looking for a job. They are not applying for the job. They're probably never going to look for another job ever again. They have locked into a particular path. They don't have a frame of reference. They don't know what it's like to work at Facebook or your hospital or a vet center or a Jiffy Lube, right? They don't have any frame of reference. And if they're going to say, we're great, and the job is all about showing how you're different, they're not helping you. And they're actually undercutting because they're so sure, if I say I'm good, if I say the company's good, I will look good. That's the win. That's not the win. That's not what it's about. You have to understand what you offer and be specific and clear about it so that people go, oh, I know what I want. Ooh, I want that. Let me join.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
So are there companies that would be better off not doing employer branding?
I really don't think there are. Here, the only companies that should not think about their employer brand are companies who are not going to hire again. Simple as that. And I don't care if you're talking about, well, we're a fast food joint. We only hire high school kids to flip the burgers and bring them to people's tables, right? I get that you think those are commoditized jobs. And in a lot of ways, having worked in 2 or 3 fast food places in my time, they are kind of commoditized jobs. They're really structured. You can't put too much ketchup on the burger because it's got a little gun and it puts exactly the right amount of ketchup on it, right? It does everything in this kind of, you're a human machine in a lot of these jobs. Yeah, you want them to stick around. You want them to feel like I'm not degrading myself by taking this job and becoming an inhuman dispenser of the ketchup by pressing the button on the gun, right? You want them to feel like I'm making somebody happy. This burger is going to satisfy someone. This burger is going to make someone's day. This is the treat they've been waiting for all day. That's going to lead to better staff. People who show up, people who don't call in sick, people who go the extra mile when things go right, when things are necessary. If they understand what it takes to be rewarded, they show up. They're part of the company. And I think so much over the last 50 years has shown us that the more you divorce the workers from the company and the job itself, the better the worse the outcomes are, right? If people don't feel associated with the work they're doing and the impact they make, they phone it in. They call in sick. They don't care. This is how garbage work gets done, is by saying you're not really part of the process. You're not material to the outcome. Employer brand says this is how we're different. And one of those ways you're different is the connection you have to the work, the connection you have to the outcomes. So I really can't think of a company that doesn't need an employer brand unless they're just never going to hire again. So governments need employer brand. And I have done marketing for state governments, so I know of which I speak. Spoiler, don't do it. Anyway, I've, dot bombs. I've worked for big companies and small companies and manufacturing and pharmaceuticals and SaaS and software and all sorts of companies, and they all need to hire. So therefore, they all need to be able to hire people who are the right fit. Otherwise, you're hiring people who are going to get automated out of existence, and I don't think that's the kind of company you want to build.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to your point about the example with fast food. I really like some elements of McDonald's employer brand, one of which they focus on being America's best first job.
Yeah.
And so they're not saying, hey, we're out to have people here for their entire career, whereas some other companies are trying to do that. And so to your point, managing expectations is huge. And that's something that I've actually researched and I talked about in my book, The Review Cycle, the correlation between star ratings on product reviews, brand reviews, employer reviews. There definitely is some magic in managing expectations. And in fact, Harvard Business Review did a study about this where people are willing to spend more and rate higher if expectations are managed correctly. And there were two studies, one of which was the accuracy of music genre for concert goers and food, different restaurants. If patrons felt the food was true to the type of food that they were saying they served. And so same thing with employer branding. In a sense, employees are consumers of this employee experience. And so I think that's you're spot on. And we've got a couple other questions. We've talked a little bit about some of this, but I want to skip. Well, yeah, let's just go here for some of the advice questions. We'll hit you with the hardball questions. So tell us very succinctly, how does someone start their employer brand journey if you're just kind of receiving this as a revelation, like, man, I need to care about employer branding. What do I do next?
Employer branding is one of those things where, people ask me, like, what's your favorite tech stack for achieving employer brand? And it's not how that works. Employer brand is completely agnostic to the company, to the tech stack, to the process, to the recruiters. It starts by simply saying, how do you tell your story? And even if you think you're not telling your story, you are. Look at your job posting. Are you saying anything of merit? Or are you simply saying, here are a bunch of requirements and you have to meet them, otherwise you can't apply? What is it like to apply? What is it like when you screen an interview? All that stuff are touch points that tell someone, oh, this is what it's going to be like. Like, the joke is, when people are trying to hire you, that's the nicest they're going to be to you. That's always, to me, like, they want you now. They have a need. The longer that seat is empty, the more money they lose. They want you the most now. This is when you have maximum leverage. But at the same time, this is when they're going to treat you the nicest. And if they don't treat you very well, guess what? Do the math. It's probably pretty accurate. This is where every company can tell that story. And so they tell it in a lot of different ways. So my thinking is always start somewhere. Do one project. Is it a Glassdoor project? Sure. Is it rewriting your job postings? Sure. Is it coming up with better outreach for your recruiters? Yeah. Via con Dios, whatever works for you. Just pick something that says, this is how we're different, and try it. And what happens is, as you do it once and you see some results, some kind of results, whatever, depending on the channel, depending on the tactic, depending on the project, you'll see different results. But once you start to see results, you'll start to realize this is a game of, the closer you get to a complete 360, the more value it has. Saying something slick on your social media channel is nice. You say how amazing you are at supporting your people. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of eyeballs in that. Do you say it on your career site? Do you say it in your job posting? Do you talk about it in the interviews? Do you talk about it in is it just a one-off, or is it something that's true? Now, if it's a one-off, the first thing everybody does when they get off the phone with a recruiter is Google that thing, right? What is this company really like? And so if you're seeing alignment between what the recruiter says or what the ad says or at the job, and they all kind of lines up on this idea, you go, they must care about this. This must be true. This is more likely to be true. So doing one thing is valuable. Doing that thing across the entirety of the candidate journey is incredibly valuable, right? So everybody starts with this idea that I have to come up with a catchy tagline. No, you don't. You just have to say something different. But then you need to start to go work backwards and validate it at every stage of the game to make that pithy, catchy, or not so pithy, catchy tagline more understandable. The thing about marketing is that we think it all boils down to coming up with that three, we all go, what's, Nike's world's greatest brand? Their brand is just do it. Spoil it. It's actually not. That's just a tagline, but that's a separate conversation. And we think, oh, it has to be very, very focused. It has to be very, very short. Like marketing books will tell you, the shorter the tagline, the better. The problem is the shorter the tagline, the less it's actually telling you. Like really, what exactly does just do it mean? Does it just go do the laundry? Is it just go tell your kids you love them? Is it just go to the gym? Is it just, what is it? What is it telling me? And that's the thing. Marketing taglines like that are designed to be used for everything. They don't really say much. What happens is that tagline sparks the understanding of the totality of the experience. And every commercial you've ever seen from Nike, every time you slip their shoes on, every time you put their shirts on, every time whatever it is, you go, this is a company that makes everybody an athlete, which, spoiler alert, is in fact their brand. It's not the tagline. They think that everybody's an athlete and everything is geared towards that idea. Take a lesson from that. It's not about coming up with a cool tagline that's short. It's about saying, look, that tagline is just the tip of the spear. It's a way to remind people of stuff. What are they being reminded of? Don't be scared to go deep. Like people get nervous that if they go deep or if they go longer taglines, they're going to scare people off. That's good. You didn't want 1,000 people to apply. You needed 2, the one you hired and the one who you almost hired. That's the platonic ideal here. So it's not about, coming up with something cool and catchy and pithy. It's about saying, look, if you have a North Star, connect and align everything to it. And even if it's not pithy, it will become incredibly effective.
There's such an investment on both sides of this. You have the person trying to get the job where it's vulnerable, it's taxing, doing all the interviews, doing all your applications, trying to find one that's the right fit for you. And then you have the other end where people are trying to find, employers are trying to find the right fit for them. And they have a fear of turnover, which is really expensive because how much money and time do they put into each candidate? And so this right here is so cost effective. If you can nail this, if you can get the right messaging across that gives the right expectations, you're going to reduce turnover significantly, which is a better experience for the candidate who gets the job.
100%. I mean, honestly, is anybody actually satisfied with the modern job seeking recruiting process? Recruiters are tired of it. They're bored. They're exhausted. They're burnt out. Candidates hate it. Hiring managers hate it. Leadership hates it because it's unpredictable, that no one knows. How did we get to we're all lined up on this thing that actually nobody likes, that nobody feels satisfied by? And if you look at it, it's kind of a crazy system. On one hand, you've got the candidate who's decided to boil their entire professional career into 2 pages of cherry-picked delightfulness. They don't say they got fired at that job. Why would they? They don't say that there was a complaint at that job. Why would they say that? It's nothing but puppy dogs and daisies. It's blue skies and green lights as far as the eye can see. It is, honestly, everybody looks amazing in a resume. That's right, because on the other side is this company saying how great they are and how great they are and how great they are and how great they are. They're saying how great they are, but they're not telling us anything of value. And it's like a dance where the candidate's going, what's going on over there behind what's happening in that company? And the company's going, yeah. It says you know Spanish. Oh, habla español for real. Come on, what's going on here? They're all accusing each other of lying. Nobody believes anybody. And at the end of 4 weeks, they go, welcome to the family. What? No. How is this how it works? Everybody's lying. Everybody's untrusting. Everybody's uncredible. This is insane. It's a wonder anybody ever finds a job ever. It's a wonder that anyone sticks around for a job. The more you lean into this idea that recruiting is about finding the lid for your pot, you realize how important it is to define and describe your pot accurately so that the person who goes, I have that lid, can hear you like a dog whistle from far across the field and go, yes, I'm here. I can help you. That is what recruiting should be. And that's where employer brand helps. The model that makes a company's employer brand work is the same model that makes a candidate work. They stand out. They define what makes them different. They define what makes them special and unique and interesting. And together they find each other. Yeah, that's how you get retention. You're not by spouting platitudes about how wonderful you are. Then you're just going to get overloaded with applications. It's about both sides going, I understand the pros and the cons on both sides. Let's make this work.
We're circling right back to strategy replaces effort, thinking smarter, not harder. And I think for any of our listeners that maybe they're not in the employer branding space, maybe they're in a different space, but most everybody has experiences looking for a job. I think it can work for them too, to use strategy in their resume instead of just trying to sound so amazing, to make themselves be able to find a job that's going to be the right fit for them. Like have their resume speak that and be transparent in that way.
Totally. There's a, if you ever hired and you ever done we're in this weird point where no one has ever printed a resume in the last 8 years, right? No one does that anymore. They just, it's all PDFs and stuff. I was there at the end where people still printed resumes. And I remember I was hiring a replacement directly under me. And the person who was leaving, I said, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to let you help me pick your replacement. And she's like, what? I said, here, someone has printed all of the application resumes. Take these home, come home tomorrow and tell me who are the handful of people I should talk to. She took them home and she came back like she could not believe what she had just seen. She goes, every one of these resumes is exactly the same. They say the same words. They use the same template. It's all in the same font. It's all in the same format. It's all the same stuff. I'm like, yes. So who did you pick? She goes, I picked these 3 that said something different. Yeah. When everybody sounds the same, you don't pick the best because there's no way to measure the best. What you do is you pick the person who stands out. And that's exactly the same model you use for employer branding. If you stand out, people have a reason to choose you. And I think we've taught generations of people, myself included, that resumes need to fit in a certain box. And the answer is no, resumes are commercials for your value. What would Oprah's resume be? It wouldn't be in 11-point font Times New Roman. Oprah's resume would say, I'm Oprah, period, end of page, turn page over, see first page. That's all Oprah's resume has to be, right? She's Oprah. You could apply that to lots of different people. That's the commercial. It's like, this is what I do. This is what I'm for. And if you think you have to check certain boxes, that's wrong. It's understanding what makes you different and spelling it out so that people go, I see the value there.
Yep. And you are the employer brand nerd. There, period.
Yeah, that's your
reverse page,
unique identifier, right?
So I've got one last question here before we're kind of wrapping up. I've seen this before. I know that you've seen this when you have employees that see the employer branding and they say, hey, that's not actually us. Like I haven't experienced, the puppies and the daisies and all that kind of stuff. So what is this? Like, why is this happening sometimes at companies and how do we address it?
I worked for a company, and I will not name the name because it's unnecessary, where I swear one day somebody read an article, probably a Fast Company, possibly for Harvard Business Review, that says it's important that you list your values. We've already heard these articles and seen these blog posts and tweets and what have you. Like, oh, okay, quick, let's write down our values. And they wrote down their values, and one of them was customers. And I'm like, I don't think that's a value. I think that's called how one makes money. Moving on. But they wrote their values down and they handed it to the designer and they said, make some posters. And the designer said, you got it, boss. And they made 5 posters. And they said, I made the posters. They said, great. Take them to the printers, make 100 copies each and hang them around the office. And they did. And I think the sole purpose of that was to never have to think about those values ever again. Why think about it? They're on a wall. I can ignore them now. That's not employer brand. That's not even good values. What it's about is businesses feeling aspirational, feeling the need to look good, feeling the need to sound good, and going off on a weird tangent to do crazy things that aren't adding value. If an employer brander says this is your employer brand, and it doesn't, and it feels in any way like a reveal, they're lying to you. They did bad work. Like if I told you, you know what, Matt? I don't know if you know this, but you wear glasses. What? This is self-evident. Everybody can see it. It's literally right there on the front of your face. It should not be a shock. When employer branding is not, here's this magic secret thing about you that no one knows. What it is saying, this is the thing that's interesting and that people are going to be attracted to. It's not about putting lipstick on the pig. It's about saying, have you tried the bacon? It's delicious. It's the same thing, except you're not trying to figure out how do I make it look good. You're trying to say, what is the true attribute about this place that is interesting and engaging and exciting? How do I pull that out? And you go, yep, that sounds like me. You say, good, we're done. If an employee says that doesn't sound like us, go back to square one. Try again. Stop listening to the CEO and whoever else is telling you, make us look good, and instead say, what about us is different? And that starts with a good audit of your competitors, understanding what the industry is like, and then going, okay, what do we do? What do we offer? What's our mission? What's our experience? What's our reward that is different? And start with that. That is how you build a better brand.
Absolutely. And listening to what the employees are saying. I mean, they're the ones experiencing this. This is the same as listening to your customers, right?
Yep.
We talk to companies all the time about their employee reviews and analyzing those reviews to understand the top positive and negative experience drivers, the things that are mentioned in reviews most often about what people like and dislike. And those positives, those are your cultural competitive advantages, the things that are mentioned most organically in an unstructured request. It's not a specific question in an internal engagement survey. It's just on Glassdoor, what are the pros and cons? And if you sum all that up, that's an easy place to start for a company that either feels they're misaligned or they don't know where to start.
Yep.
Just go review what your people are saying. You can do the same exercise with comments in an employee engagement survey. And in a best case scenario, I would say you're analyzing both of those data sets side by side, because people have a different tone when they're talking online publicly versus if they're sharing something internally on a survey. And when you compare what are the top positive drivers on that internal survey and in the reviews, sometimes you'll see misalignments where, maybe it's PTO and people are saying, they like the PTO, but for whatever reason, that's coming up as more of a negative in the reviews. That's an expectation management opportunity where we can speak to what the PTO is more accurately. We don't need to go back to the CFO and say, hey, we need to increase PTO. Yeah. No, we need to talk about it differently. We need to draw a more fair comparison about how we compare to the national benchmark. And then all of a sudden, to your point, you were talking about that earlier, like satisfaction goes up because now people know what to expect and how it fairly compares to other things. So
I'll take that a step further. I think if there is something your company does really, really well, a real strong positive, it comes with baggage. There's no such thing as an unadulterated, pure positive. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. Facebook is famous for saying they move fast and break things, which is great if you want to move fast and break things. But no one says you should join Facebook. It's incredibly stable. You can't. They're busy moving fast and breaking things. You can't be both. You can't go north and south at the same time. You pick a direction. If your company says we're incredibly supportive and incredibly collaborative, that's great. They cannot also say, and we make decisions quickly. I'm sorry, that's not how that works. Everything is consensus driven. Everything is let's make sure we all agree before we even decide what day it is. Any good thing about your brand has a downside. And don't think about that quote unquote dark side, that downside, that shadow side as a bad thing. That dark side proves the positive claim you want people to know about you. So I worked at Roku, and for a long time it was, you see these Glassdoor reviews about this place is chaotic, it's messy, no one knows what's going on, there's no rules, there's no process, there's no documentation, the inmates are running the asylum, it's a nightmare, blah, blah, blah. On the face of it, that's a bad thing. Quick, flag it, get rid of it. You want to kill it, hit it with a shovel or something. The truth is, you then respond and say, you know what? We offer a great deal of autonomy. In fact, that's what we focus on most. And that means we hire people to tell us what the documentation should be, what the process should be, what the rules should be. It's not that the inmates are running the asylum, it's that we hired people like you to tell us how things should be. And if that's not comfortable for you, we completely understand. We wish you best of luck in your next job, blah, 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 blah. Suddenly, I'm not changing a 2-star review into a 5-star review. But what I'm doing is making that 2-star review work for me, because now it's proof of the wonderful things I'm saying, because you are admitting to and embracing the downside of it. It's a 3-dimensional brand.
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
You know your employer brands, James. And I will just say everything that you said, it just kind of clicks and it makes sense. And that's how
Nice.
you know it's the real deal. It's the right information. And thank you so much for your time today. And to our listeners, be sure to follow James, and we will post his LinkedIn link on our article, our highlight article. And
I want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I put all my resources in one spot because I know people are like, okay, if that's interesting, where do they want to go digging? Go to employerbrand.ing or employerbrand in.
Okay.
All my resources there. It's books, it's classes, it's white papers, it's podcasts, it's videos, it's like articles, it's everything I've ever built there. And most of it's free. So if you're interested in thinking about how employer brand can work at your company, whether it's big or small, whether it's exciting or boring, and I think most people go, my company is too boring to do employer brand. Not true. I don't care if you make bottle caps. Bottle cap makers have an employer brand. They should use it. But all the stuff is over at employerbrand.ing.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So employerbrand.ing. Thank you. And to all our listeners, please like and subscribe and listen for future episodes. And thanks so much, James. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Krista. Thanks, Matt.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit podcast and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mowbray.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mowbray.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.